Hello everyone, sorry. So Jane's Zoom crashed and she will be right back, and I think she is back. Okay, Jane is back.
Hi everyone, I'm so sorry. My internet here at home vanished, so I apologize. Miriam, what section are we on?
I was just saying that your Zoom crashed, so we can pick up right where you left off.
Okay, great. All right, let me just share my screen and we'll get back to it. Thank you all for your patience. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll just talk. I was just going to tell you all about our agenda for today. We'll introduce you to our panelists. We'll tell you more about the scholarship. We'll walk you through the application process and talk about how to submit a standout application. We'll tell you more about the GVS weekend in Washington, D.C., and then we'll finish with Q&A and next steps. So I'd like to introduce you to our panelists next. From the Rackham side, I'm thrilled to welcome Ephraim Brammer, Assistant Dean, who will be speaking about the application review and sharing more about what makes a compelling application. On the scholar side, we have Dian Luong, who's concluded 2 years as a Gupta Values Scholar, and Shamim Bano, who's a returning Gupta Values Scholar this year. They'll show more about the application process and the experience of being a Gupta Values Scholar. So thank you all for being here today. Next, I'll share a little background about the scholarship. The Gupta Values Scholarship was established in 2017 and has had 29 Rackham Scholars awarded so far. It was established by the Gupta Family Foundation, which is a private nonprofit foundation headquartered in Virginia. I'm excited to say we have a special message from the Gupta themselves, which we'll take a moment to hear from them directly.
Hello, I am Shashikant Gupta.
And I'm Margaret Gupta. We understand that you're considering applying for a Gupta Values Scholarship. So we thought we would take a little time and tell you about the scholarship because it is unique. It's more than a check in the mail or a deposit in your bank account. We want to get to know you and for you to know us. And we want you to deeply appreciate the values on which the scholarship is built so that you can take them forward in your lives and careers.
So how do we do this? We come to the campus in the fall to spend an evening with you. Then, each spring, all of the scholars from the University of Michigan, as well as the other campuses, come to DC to spend a weekend with us. A weekend of exploration, discussion, and reflection on what living by the values of integrity, human dignity, and excellence means in real life.
Talking about real life, let us share our journey with you. Shashi and I started our technology services business as a social experiment. We wanted to see if a business built on values could thrive in a world that was driven largely by greed. So we built our company on the same three values: integrity, human dignity, and excellence.
And it did thrive. What we found was that, contrary to common belief, these values in fact give us a strong competitive edge. Customers trusted us to do the right thing, deliver an excellent product, and develop a deeper relationship with us than is usual in transactional business. Because of this, we were able to win business against large companies like IBM and Capgemini in competitive procurements.
In 2016, we decided to bring this message to young people like you. Living a values-driven life is a superpower, not a hindrance as the current social ethos would have you think. And the changes in our country since then have served to highlight the importance of ethics for each individual and society as a whole.
We hope that you will let us join you in your life journey to reinforce these principles. We invite you to apply for the Gupta Values Scholarship and join us in an exciting journey. We look forward to seeing you in Ann Arbor in the fall and DC in the spring. Hello.
Wonderful. So thank you so much to Margaret and Shashi for sharing your story with us today. So our next question is about why become a Gupta scholar. So first, you'll be becoming a Gupta scholar means you're joining an esteemed group of scholars across all disciplines and multiple universities. The support extends beyond the financial support and into meaningful experiences that last beyond the year. From your fellow scholars to the Gupta Family Foundation themselves, being a part of this group will add connections, mission-driven work, and the chance to make a difference. We're also excited to announce that this year the award has increased to $10,000 per scholar. This will be awarded in April after participating in the Washington, D.C. weekend. The scholarship is eligible for an additional year renewal, which means you could opt to participate in the program with these awards and these events for a second year if you so choose. As a Gupta Values Scholar, you'd be asked to attend 2 connection opportunities with the Guptas. This includes a dinner on October 22nd here at Rackham, which will be attended by Margaret and Shashi and by Rackham Dean Mike Solomon. The second is a weekend in Washington, D.C. with the Gupta Family Foundation, your fellow Rackham scholars, and scholars from MSU and Northern Virginia Community College. This year's trip will be April 9th to 11th, 2027. Now, I'd love to hear more from our scholars. What has been a highlight of your experience as a Gupta Values Scholar? We'll start with Deanne, and then we'll hear from Shamim. Deanne, would you like to kick us off?
Thank you, Jen, and hello, everyone. My name is Dieng Leung. I am a PhD candidate in communication and media, and I used to be a journalist. Actually, I spoke as a panelist last year, and I also talked about the highlight of being a Gupta scholar last year. But I still have something to say about it this year, so you can tell how so many things I have to talk about being a Gupta scholar. So, in a nutshell, the scholarship helped me reconnect my academic work with the values that shaped my earlier career, which is journalism. What I mean is, when you are in grad school, you can be very focused on things like deadlines, publications, and what comes next in your life. So the scholarship gave me a reason to step back and ask a more basic question. What kind of scholar do I want to become, and whom should my work serve? So the financial support obviously matters, for sure. 7,500 obviously matters. But for me, the bigger value was being part of a community that connects my academic work with integrity and public purpose. And here is how I experience it. So before my PhD, as I told you, I was a researcher and a journalist. So I spent years reporting on and researching on powerful political and commercial interests. Those experiences repeatedly forced me to decide what integrity actually meant when there were so many personal risks involved. So when I started writing down the Gupta application, it made me reconnect those choices to the researchers I was becoming. So over the past 2 years or 3 years, the scholarship has kept that connection visible. So the bottom line is, it does remind me that academic success does matter most when it remains connected to the values and the public purpose that I committed to serving. That's the key highlight of being a Gupta scholar that I was able to recognize over the past 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanne. Shamim, why don't you tell us a bit more as well?
Sure. I'm Shamim Banu, and I'm a dual degree student at SEAS and at RAS. My personal highlight of Gupta Values Scholarship experience so far has been an opportunity to meet with a diverse group of scholars from other universities and backgrounds and the field of study during our trip in Washington, D.C. We get to meet each other. And other than that, like spending this weekend with the fellow scholars allowed me to build a meaningful connection, learn from different perspectives, and become part of a community which is united by a shared commitment to service and making a positive change in the society. Throughout our community services during the weekend in Washington, D.C., and the team discussions and conversations around different social issues at the dinner with the family, I was able to reflect more deeply on my own responsibility as a future leader and as a member of the society. Other than that, like visiting historical sites in the Washington, D.C., while engaging with other scholars who share a passion for service, community service, and which was a very meaningful and memorable experience for me. And the weekend further strengthened my belief in the importance of leading with integrity, staying connected to your deep values and your root values. Where are you coming from? And treating every person with integrity, making friends, and using my education and opportunity to create a meaningful, positive impact and change in the community we live and we serve. So that was a highlight from this experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shamin. Wonderful. So now that you have an idea of what it means to be a Gupta Values Scholar, I'll talk about the logistics of applying. So any Rackham graduate student in good academic standing is eligible. You'll need to be an active student in the fall and winter semesters of the year that you're applying. Awardees will be selected through their application materials. Recipients have demonstrated integrity in the face of challenges, a commitment to human dignity, and a dedication to excellence in all they do inside and outside the academy. The Gupta Values Scholarship application consists of three main components: a personal essay, a recommendation letter, and your CV. The essay prompt is designed to let you showcase how you've demonstrated the core values in your life and work. Be sure to follow the prompt closely and be specific in your responses. You'll also need a recommendation letter and an updated CV. Your recommendation letter should come from someone familiar with your work, such as a faculty advisor, a professor, or a professional supervisor. I suggest making a plan to ask as soon as possible. You'll want to give your recommender plenty of time to write a thoughtful and compelling letter. If you have a question about recommenders, you can email rackhamff@umich.edu for more specific advice, and Miriam will add that email address to the chat. In terms of other advice, make sure you share the prompt with your recommenders so they know what the reviewing committee will be looking for. You should consider how your essay and your recommendation letter will fit together. What could your recommender tell us that would add depth to your essay? Maybe illuminate another side of your application. You may want to share details about the essay and specifically name what aspects of your work or academic interests you'd like the recommender to speak to. If you work far enough ahead, you could even share your essay with your recommender to help them write the recommendation. Next, let's hear from our scholars again. I'd love to hear more about how you approach your essay, and then what advice would you give regarding the recommendation letter? How did you guide your recommender in terms of writing a strong letter? Shamin, would you like to begin? And then we'll hear from Diane.
Sure. So I approached my essay as like a reflection of my journey, the values that shaped me, and the purpose that continues to guide my work. So I wanted to share not only like academics and professional experience, but also like a very personal experiences that shaped my commitment to education, service, and creating opportunities for other what I did in past. So I am basically an international student, and I traveled a lot in different cities across Pakistan and as well as like in US. And leaving home at a very young age to pursue education taught me the transformative power of learning and importance of using opportunities to uplift other. Um, yeah. So my education journey from Pakistan to Michigan has like strengthened my belief that education is not only part of the personal growth. So I added all this stuff in my application. I made it like very personal, not very professional, or because they have their CV obviously. So and through like I focused more on my involvement in the community initiatives. Like I am running a small student welfare organization for underprivileged kids in remote regions in Pakistan. So I included that, and I learned the importance of like I aided the importance of compassion, collaboration, and services. I wanted my essay to reflect how these experiences shape my commitment to addressing social challenges and creating meaningful impact. And I added my personal story. And also, I did my academic interest in sustainability and development, and my broader goal of working towards more equitable and inclusive societies through businesses. So I wanted my readers to understand not just that I have what I have accomplished so far, what are like my degrees or my achievements so far, but I also was more inclined toward the commitment to serving others and aiding how we aid the important values of like integrity, human dignity, and excellence that guided our journey. So my approach was more of like making it more personal, that they know us as a person, not as somebody like a recommendation letter for a job or something like that. So for the recommendation letter, I approached my recommendation letter by choosing my faculty advisor at SEAS, because he has closely followed my academic journey and progress and growth throughout the journey in the University of Michigan. So I emailed him like few days before the deadline. I reached out to him and requested a meeting to discuss the Gupta Values Scholarship in detail, its missions, and why it's important, like why this opportunity is like meaningful to me. So during our conversation, I shared my education journey, my future inspirations, my previous community work, and commitment to using education as tool to create a positive change. So I wanted to give him enough time to thoroughly like reflect on my conversation and write a letter that genuinely represent me as a person. So since he already was familiar with my progress and work, so I think his recommendation letter play a like role in this application. Yeah.
Thank you, Shamim. Deanne, how about you? How did you approach your essay, and how did you guide your recommender in terms of writing a strong letter?
Okay, so I am sure that when you are here and you have planned to apply for the Gupta scholarship, you have already have great stories about your own integrity to tell. So the two key questions you need to be able to answer is why me and why now? Why should I get the Gupta scholarship and why now? So I'm sure that you have great stories to tell. The question is how to put that story in 1,500 words in the most coherent and concise manner. So my advice, the first one is, and the thorough advice is, build one clear through line, build one clear thesis for your own essays, and make the job of the reviewer easy. What I mean by that is, before starting writing your application, before writing your essay, ask yourself, if the reviewer remembers only one thing about me after reading this essay, what should it be? That is your through line. That is your thesis. So then put yourself in the shoes of the reviewers, put yourself in the situation of the reviewers, because reviewers should not have the background that you are having. So you shouldn't make them have to figure out why your story demonstrates integrity, human dignity, or excellence. Make the logic obvious and visible. So try to follow this logic. What happened? What was at stake? What choice did you make? What did it cost? And what does it reveal about you, about your integrity? So here we use the show don't tell principle. Don't just announce your values. Don't just say that I value integrity. Show real examples. Show the moment when those values were actually tested. And again, the principle of putting yourself in the shoes of the reviewers is very important here. Always try to make it obvious to understand, because something that is very obvious in your field might not quite so for a reviewer who comes from another discipline. So make it obvious and accessible to the reviewers. And here is how I did it for my essay. So as with a career in journalism and research, my own through line. My own thesis was essentially integrity under pressure. So that's the through line I was trying to show in my essay. So I use different episodes from journalism, but they all demonstrated the same pattern. There was pressure for me to back away from something I thought mattered, but I had to make a choice, and that choice involved some professional risk. So I used many examples in my essay, and they were different, but they were all doing the same argumentative work. They all boiled down to one single central argument that I didn't back away from pressure. So just to sum up, if it's any helpful for your essay, choose one through line, choose one thesis, then make the reviewer's job easy. Show your challenge, your choice, the cost, and what it reveals about you and your integrity. That's about the essay. For the recommendation letter, I have to say that you are much more lucky than us in the previous cycles, because if I'm right, for this application cycle, you are able to choose a recommender who doesn't need to be your advisor, right? So they could come from other fields. So my point is, it's very important to choose someone who understands your integrity best. So it doesn't need to come from your advisor, because I could see from the questions already that you just entering your first year at UMich here. So your advisor might not understand your integrity too well. So you are free to choose someone who you think would understand how integrity is part of your career, is part of your identity. So choose the right person is very important. And the second point is very realistic. Everyone is busy with their own life, so don't assume that they remember about the deadline for your letter. So reach out to them early if possible. What I did when I applied for this scholarship is to reach out to my advisor 1 month in advance. And once he agreed to write a letter, remind him 2 weeks before the deadline, and 1 week before the deadline, and 3 days before the deadline. That's what I did. And it's not a crime to do so. And actually, they would appreciate that, because everyone is busy with their own life. So try to make sure that your recommender remembers about the deadline, and just don't choose the recommender just because of their name, but because of how they understand you well enough to write a meaningful letter about yourself.
Thank you, Deanne. And yes, I'm going to just concur what Deanne said about your recommender does not need to be a faculty advisor. So anyone who maybe attended last year or who's applied in previous years might have seen that, but we expanded the sort of official people we suggested as recommenders, because we recognize that plenty of our applicants are just starting their graduate school experience, and we want to open it up. So they may not, if you don't have a relationship with your faculty advisor yet, that's okay. And just, yeah, as Deanne and Shamim both talked about, think about someone that knows your journey and can really speak to you and your experience. So thank you both for sharing more. So next, we're going to hear from Ithram, who's one of our application reviewers. Ithram, can you tell us more about what you're looking for from the reviewer side? So how do you define the values that are central to the essay, and what kinds of things have resonated with you in the past?
Yeah, thank you, Jane, and thank you everybody for attending this really important workshop and your interest in the Gupta Values Scholarship. I feel like Shamim and Dien pretty much covered everything, and I'm going to be repeating a lot of what they said. We have brilliant students, and obviously they've been successful at successfully navigating, this scholarship. Um, I think it's important just to remind everyone that this isn't kind of your straightforward academic scholarship, right? There really is something different. Starting from the video, right? This really is a different kind of experience. And this isn't to say getting $10,000 for getting a 4.0 and having many publications isn't a valuable award and isn't important, but that's not what this is, right? And so as a reviewer, that's kind of the spirit that we bring into it. This really is a special kind of opportunity to work with some incredible mentors in the Guptas and be a part of a really important and supportive community of Gupta scholars, all built around three really important values, right? And so, as much as you need to be excellent in the classroom and in your research, what we really look for most are these stories about integrity and human dignity and excellence in ways that maybe transcend or go beyond, may include your academic achievements, but kind of transcend what you're doing in the classroom. And so, as a reviewer, I think parse out and what they mean to us differently. And so when we look at integrity, we're looking at you to clearly describe a challenging situation or number of situations that have relevant ethical considerations and reflection about your own personal values and how you overcame them in the moment or over time. And so this is about you. This is about you and how you have acted and the actions that you've taken, the decisions that you've made. Um, good example, stripped from the headlines. Think about Dion and other journalists. Like somebody broke the story on Infantino and FIFA. And somebody could have made the decision not to, right? So integrity is like, am I going to break this story that is going to make a lot of people's lives difficult, but has a real ethical component to it, right? Like this is something that a lot of people care about, right? And there's something that's unethical going on here. And by me revealing something that's going on in the background that's a little bit shady, like that has some personal risk to it, right? It's not like these aren't powerful people that can't do something if you reveal their secret, right? And so that kind of showing a personal integrity. Uh, we do see essays that talk about like I was tempted to cheat, but I decided not to cheat, right? And so that shows some personal integrity, of course, but we really are looking at like larger challenges, right? So I was in a lab and we had a time pressure, and somebody in the lab wanted to falsify data. And there's been a big federal grant, and I just said no, like we can't falsify data to meet our publishing deadlines or our grant federal deadlines, right? It's unethical, right? That's higher than like I, the person next to me in the class showed me the answers and I decided to look the other way, right? And so showing real integrity in the face of real, high stakes challenges, despite, some potential for, consequences for you personally. Human dignity, it is about your decisions and it is about your decision making, but it's about your decision making with regard to others. So we're interested in the examples of where you have sort of um, put others people's interests first, right? And you really value and have compassion and empathy for others. So again, not to lean too heavily on again in the journalism analogy, but it's pretty easy to build off of. Um, in the case of the FIFA journalist, like it's great to write about sports, and I'm sure you have a great platform, and I'm sure a lot of people, will read your articles and listen to what you have to say about sports. But I think as a reviewer, we might be a little bit more interested in the journalists who decided to write about poverty around the world, right? Or that might resonate a little bit more strongly. Or somebody who, at even challenges to their own personal career, decides that they really want to write about climate change, right? Because climate change is important and, it's a really important social factor that for whatever reason, politically, the pendulum swings from time to time one way to the next, but climate change affects billions of people on this planet. And I'm going to show personal integrity to write about that, but it's also connected to, my compassion, my love for other people, right? And their health and well-being. And so, um, that's kind of the differentiating factor. When we look at integrity, it's about your personal decisions. Human dignity is about how you serve or honor or show compassion and empathy to others. Um, and then excellence, and then again, I would encourage you, there's kind of a breadth of examples and a depth of examples. So if you have just one example, that example should have tremendous depth, right? I think, generally if you have two or three examples, that's probably best, like in when you're talking about integrity, human dignity, and excellence. But it's okay if you have one really great example, and you have one really great story to share. Kind of, I mean, like if you connect personally around one really good example, but I would lean towards something like two or three really solid examples to kind of show your personal integrity as well as your compassion for others in terms of human dignity. And then excellence, we do have your CVs and we do have your transcripts, but still highlighting a couple things that are important about your academic achievements doesn't hurt, right? And especially if you can tie it all together, right? So if I was sticking with the journalism analogy, if I wrote as a journalist about climate change in a corporate newspaper that's not going to really like that, or your sponsors, the people who buy your ads aren't going to really like that. But I do it because it's the right thing to do for the planet and for people who live on it. And oh, by the way, I won the Pulitzer Prize. Like, don't forget to mention you won the Pulitzer Prize, right? Like show excellence, right, in all the different ways that you can, including the academics. Like, don't assume that we're going to pull out your favorite things about your academic achievements and accomplishments from your CV. Like, tell us. You have an opportunity to write that into your essay and highlight it yourself. And so, excellence definitely beyond the classroom, but also in the classroom and in the lab, right? And so, again, what resonates with us both, I think Shamin said it, and Dion did as well. It really is the personal story because this is about joining a community and engaging with others around shared values.
Thank you so much, Ephraim. Uh, Now, you may have touched on this, but anything else you want to mention that applicants should try to avoid beyond what you've said so far?
Yeah, a couple things that I'd avoid. So I would avoid letting the CV speak for itself, right? I'd avoid letting the transcript speak for itself. It wouldn't be the top thing that I'd highlight, right? Because we do have that. Um, the other thing about letters of recommendation, um, we got some questions in the chat, as John had noted. Um, if you're a first semester student, you are by definition in good academic standing because you haven't done anything yet not to be in good academic standing, right? So, yes, you are in good academic standing. And it makes the letter a little bit difficult, as has been mentioned, right? Because you may not know your advisor very well yet. You may not even have established, depending on what program you are, you may not have even had an advisor permanently assigned to you yet, right? So, even if you have a really good relationship with your academic advisor, they still might not know all the amazing things that you do outside their lab or their research group, right? And so again, focusing on somebody who knows you with regard to these values, right? Somebody who can really speak to your sense of integrity and your sense of human dignity and your achievements and your excellence, both in the class, the lab, and beyond, right? So somebody who knows how much amazing community service that you've done, or that's kind of a special letter writer, right? And so choose your letter writer very carefully. Have good conversations with them. The last thing I would just kind of lift up is be careful of the trauma narrative as well. Like, we're not asking you to write a trauma narrative, and you won't be selected because your experience was the most traumatic, right? And so we don't in any way want to resurface harm that you've experienced. Like, there's ways that you can write very powerful stories that connect with the reviewers that don't necessarily reveal deeply personal details that you really don't want to share with people, or is not in your personal self-interest and your own health and well-being to share, right? And so I'd also just kind of avoid sharing traumatic events, because you can demonstrate integrity and human dignity without necessarily sharing those kind of personal details.
Thank you so much, Ephraim. So next, now that you've got a good idea of what it takes to submit a stellar application, I want to share a little more detail about the weekend in Washington, D.C., since this is such a key, memorable part of this experience. The trip to Washington, D.C. includes lots of time with your fellow scholars, as well as sightseeing and connections with public figures. The trip has a theme every year, which the speakers and activities are based on. Last year's theme was Healthcare in America. There's usually a service project. So, for example, last year the group went to Cornerstone's food bank. And then there are also sessions with public figures like politicians or leaders in their field. There's also time for sightseeing, including monuments and museums, and all of this with plenty of time to build connections with the other scholars and discuss these meaningful themes. So I would love to hear from our panelists again. Our attendees here know a little more about the trip. So scholars, are there any highlights from this weekend in your experience that you'd like to share with us? Deanne, would you like to go first?
Okay. So the first obvious thing is that it's just great that to get in to DC at weekends for free. You have great food, you have great hotel, and one more plus thing is when you are notified that you get the scholarship in October, I think you won't get your money after your DC trip. So you have something to look forward to during that trip too as well. But aside from all that, I mean, when you get to meet a group of praise scholars from other schools, from the Michigan State, from another school in Virginia, um, I spent a lot of time with people that I mean that brought together scholars working on very different problems. So that forced me to explain why my work matters in the most ordinary and accessible language. So that it reminds me of that integrity and public services can look very different across disciplines. And when I got to meet different young scholars from other schools, I kept being inspired by their zeal to continue to contribute to a good cause, to rally behind a good cause, and that gave me hope and optimism at a time when we feel so uncertain. So it was very rewarding when you get to know new people, young people who are always inspiring to your work and your life.
Thank you, Deanne. Shamim, what about you?
Yeah, no, so in the weekend, like one of the favorite parts was learning about the values and journey behind the family themselves, like their commitment to support underserved communities and creating opportunities for those who need the most. During the dinner, it was the last night in DC, and they showed us how like they help like special kids creating crafts, and now they're selling it and started earning, and they're feeling like they're valued, they're involved. So their dedication to like giving back to the society reminded me that success is like not only measured by personal achievements, but also by the way we contribute to the well-being of the others. So it was like a kind of very inspirational and motivational, and a sign of like hope for the future. Like, so that dinner and the discussion we had, the last discussion, that was like my favorite part of the weekend, because it was like very emotional and inspirational, and it was kind of like hope for the future that yeah, we can play our role as future leaders and can create impact in somebody else's life. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shamim. It's wonderful. So next we'll do a little more Q&A. So we've got a little bit of time. I think Miriam's going to share some questions. I wanted to start with one that I saw once or twice in the Q&A about conflicts with the dinner in October specifically. So if you have a conflict with the dinner in October, that's not a reason you should not apply. So we're never going to not award it to you because of that conflict. We've had some out-of-state scholars who do a Zoom with the Guptas instead. So, being able to, knowing that you'll be able to attend in DC is really important, but the dinner, definitely don't feel like you cannot apply because you're out of state in the fall semester or something like that. We'll find a way to make that work. So I wanted to start there because I'd seen a couple of questions related to that. Miriam, are there any other questions that you're seeing that we should address out loud? I know there's a lot in the chat.
Um, so Varsha has a question. How has being part of the GVS community impacted your personal growth?
Great. Shamim or Deanne, would either one of you like to speak on that?
I think I explained it a bit, that it was, for me, it was like a very emotional, inspirational, and motivational kind of uh, weekend, because we could like actually see how the family, they themselves like created impact in others' life. So it was kind of reflection for us that like now that we have some opportunities, we are maybe like privileged to like a lot of people, like we have some opportunities, and we have skills, and we have the knowledge that a lot of people don't have. So we can like in one way or other way can help others and make their lives have like easy or guide them. So I think that was like the favorite part, and a motivation and a personal reflection for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything you want to add, Deanne?
Not much because I mostly agree with what Shaman has said. What I would add is that when I got to listen to different speakers during my 2 years, I mean, the way they spoke and the way they told their stories gave me a lot of um, good lessons on how I should articulate again what I'm doing to ordinary audience, try to use the language that everyone would understand. Because actually, to be honest, there were good speakers, but there were also not so good speakers who failed to articulate what they were doing in the best way possible. So I learned not only from the best, but I also learned from what I should have done better. So that's, I mean, helped me a lot during my career as someone who worked in communication too.
Great. Let's see. Any other questions that you can see in the chat that you think we should address out loud, Miriam? We'll send out
I think there
answers.
were a few questions about the recommendation letter.
Okay.
So if you just want to speak to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, what our scholars and what Ethram, emphasize is, I think, just hold that sort of someone who can speak to the values, and it doesn't have to necessarily have to be a U of M connected person. It's more important that they are connected to you and that they have a relationship with you and can sort of know you in a way that illuminates beyond your essay and really highlights you. So don't feel like you have to use a faculty advisor or a U of M professor, especially if you've only just joined our U of M community. So what else?
And then I think the rest of the questions are deadline, which I answered. So the deadline is September 4th, and we
Mm-hmm.
will have the website updated soon with all of that information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm sorry if it said the wrong date. We'll make sure that that gets updated. But yeah, it is September 4th, so hold on to that. We'll have 5 new scholars this year. So last year, one of our scholars graduated, and so he's off doing other things, so he won't be returning. So this year, we'll get to award for 5 new students. Um,
Oh, I
yeah,
do have a new question from
okay,
Kira. How do you think the GVS shaped your path moving forward through your graduate career?
great. Shamim or Deanne, any of you, would you like to speak on that?
Um, yeah, I mean, for the financial part, like 10,000 is like a good amount. You can use it as like a stipend as well. Other than that, yeah, like pretty much I think we covered it, the values. This is not like any other typical scholarship application. This is like, I feel like it was very different from what other applications I did last year. So you have to focus on more being of like, how can you relate your work uh, towards these three core values they have, and how can you as a human can create impact in somebody else's life. I think I'm repeating a lot of these points, but yeah, more or less it's like that. So uh, and you get to know the family as well, and they're really welcoming. They welcome us to their house and they arrange a very nice like dinner, and we get to know each other, and it was a social event as well. So I think these, and other than that, we get a chance to do a food rescue empowerment, like there was another activity that we did with like packed food for school kids, and we wrote like small notes on all of these packages, and everything felt like a very personal touch. So I think like you can have a very good opportunity to have a good weekend in DC and reflect on how you are as a person. So I would take it as that way. So yeah.
Okay, I want to be honest here because I think it would be a bit of a stress to say that this scholarship alone would play a key role in shaping the path of my career. But because there are many other factors that also play a role in shaping the path of my career. But one thing I cannot deny here is that when you get the scholarship, you are able to get to know so many people from different disciplines. And for your career, when it's the most important to continue to widen your networking, to get to know more people, and you have a good resource when you get to know those people. So you will never know what kind of opportunities or chance those people would bring to you in the near future. So keep networking, widening your network, and burn no bridge. So that's the most important thing that the scholarship has given me so far. That's the key takeaway here.
Thank you. Great. 150, it's 1:55. So we'll wrap up soon. Miriam, do you think there's any other questions that you've seen come through that we should talk about out loud?
So I have two questions in the chat or in the
Mhm.
Q&A. Are there any particular fields or focuses of work that the Guptas prioritize?
So the Guptas don't make selections. So it's our Rackham reviewers that make the selections. And I'd say the answer is no. There's no particular field or discipline you need to come from. I've seen scholars from all sorts of disciplines. Um, Ethram, yes, why don't you go?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Jane. I think, again, this is really about the values, and the values transcend these disciplinary distinctions. And so, whether you're in the arts, humanities, or a STEM field, humanistic social sciences, or quantitative social sciences, you can talk about your integrity, and you can talk to your about your commitment to human dignity. Um, it's not a criteria that we consider, like in terms of what discipline you are. But we are aware, and we would, showing integrity on our own end, like to see a diversity of fields and disciplines represented, but we don't make decisions based on that, right? Like we want this to be an opportunity available to everybody from any field.
Great question. Thank you for your response, Ethram. Anything else in our last minute or two?
Yes, I still have some questions. I think they're both related to resources, and I'll answer these. So you mentioned briefly that you expanded the suggestions for recommendation letter sources. Can you direct to where these suggestions can be found? And then the other question is, can we get a link where we can find these prompts for the essay and the letter of recommendations? And all of that for both those questions will be sent in the email, correct?
Yep.
So
And
all,
it's,
yeah.
yes,
Sorry, go
absolutely.
ahead.
And that brings me to my housekeeping. So the link there brings you to the Gupta page on the Rackham site, and from there you can click the apply button, which goes to the RAMP portal. And so the prompt for the essay is there. Details on the reviewers is there. So everything you need should be there, as well as we'll send all this out so you have it that way as well. As we mentioned, applications are due September 4th by midnight. Um, Anything else that we want to touch on?
And, um, so somebody asks, I'm planning on using AI to read this application. Will reviewers be screening for AI use to ensure a fair process?
Good question. Ether, what, I guess I don't think, I feel like we're
Yeah,
not
I mean
screening,
this
but I'll let Ethan
this
talk some more about that.
intersects with two different areas that I'm doing work. So, um, the question is, will we be screening for AI? Like, I can tell you we will not like apply some market AI screening tool to the pool of applications, right? Like, we're not investing in doing that. I can also tell you that if you try to use AI to write this essay, it probably isn't going to resonate because AI tends to spit out very generic language, right? Um, and that, if you've heard anything from our panelists today, it really is about your personal story. And you write your personal story best. You write your per
So I think that actually answers another question that we have. Is creative writing encouraged or better to keep a more academic professional tone? So as Ephraim just mentioned, personal is best. And then another question we have, approximately what percentage of your previous Gupta scholars have been newly incoming graduate students?
I don't know that we have that data. I was sort of just wondering about that. I think it's not a huge percentage, but I don't think that is because of you being a newly professional. You know, it's more just like the people who've been at the university longer just have more chances to apply and things like that. So, and also the change from using a faculty advisor to a more wider pool was deliberate this year to encourage um, more students that are sort of just starting here to take advantage of this opportunity. So, um,
If it any helpful, I applied when I just finished my first year of my PhD. So a bit early, but I still got it. So
yeah.
just so you know. Yep.
Yeah, and I think one or two of our scholars last year were first year students. So certainly they can come, you know, any stage that you're in is grand. As long as you're not, if you're graduating in December, then as we talked about, that makes you sort of ineligible. You have to be a student in April. So
Yeah. In the
um,
interest of transparency, just like your program and your field of study, like we know as reviewers, whether you're a first year student or fifth year student.
yeah. All right. The prompt for the letter of recommendation seems to not be in the link provided. Can you help with that? Yes, we will make sure we get that sent out. Um, all right, so let's see. It's 2:01, so I want to try to wrap up. If you have any other questions, let's see, if you are in the last year of your master's, can you still apply? So if you're graduating in winter semester, so like April 29th or whatever it ends up being this year, then yes. But if you're graduating in December of this year, then you're not eligible. Okay. We'll make sure that we send out all of the Q&A questions. And if anyone does have anything else, please email me or our Rackham FF team. So I want to thank our panelists and thank you all for attending. And we're really excited to see your applications and hope we hear from you. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you and good luck.